Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Caitlin Weiler, and I work for the Northwestern Alumni Association. We will begin shortly, and I'm so pleased that Robert Snyder is here with us for this webinar. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions now or during the presentation, you're welcome to submit those via the chat or the Q&A feature in your webinar dashboard. Just type in your question and hit send. Robert will be answering your questions primarily at the end of the presentation, but we may jump in to ask a few of them during the presentation. But please feel free to submit your questions as they come to mind. Should you have any technical issues during the webinar, try closing out of the Zoom window or refreshing your browser. Be sure to use the same registration link from your email to get back into the webinar. Lastly, a link to the recording of this webinar and a copy of the slide deck will be sent to all registrants after this talk. Now I'm going to introduce Robert. Robert Snyder is the founder and president of Innovation Elegance LLC, a consulting firm focused on making healthy change and innovation straightforward and inevitable. A 30-year veteran of project management and the performing arts, Snyder combines conventional methodologies such as waterfall and agile with insights drawn from theater and performance. His work includes consulting and corporate roles, PMP and Agile certifications, and countless performances in vocal, dance, and theater ensembles. Snyder earned his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois and his MBA in strategy from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Now I'm going to hand it over. Thanks so much for being here, Robert.
Caitlin, thank you very much for hosting me, and thank you everyone for joining me today. Here in the middle of 2026, the topic of AI blacks out the sun. But thank goodness, the topic of culture has not completely disappeared. I think the topic of culture is so critical, valuable, but holy ambiguity, Batman. A lot of our conversations about culture are still too ambiguous to be impactful. And shaping culture, it can be downright awkward and confrontational. And so what I've done is I've assembled some materials for you today that challenge you, that invite you to reshape your culture and confront it head on, knowing that to be successful, you're going to have to reduce and minimize ambiguity, and you're going to have to dial up the awkwardness with shaping your culture. One of my favorite TED Talks is from a gentleman named Simon Sinek, and his TED Talk is called Start with Why. So let's start with why. The first reason is this acronym, VUCA. Some of you hear this acronym about once a week, and you know exactly what it means. But some of you, you might be hearing this for the first time. So VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And the conventional thinking is, well, it's just a VUCA world. Well, outside your walls, yes, it's a crazy, chaotic world. But inside your walls, where you're paying people, it should not be a VUCA environment. So my point of view is that VUCA for your team is a cop-out. We need to solve VUCA, an audacious BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, but one worth solving and one that absolutely is solvable. In corporate, many of us have these conventions and these practices and these buzzwords where we are simply doing the same things, expecting different results. This session alludes to that and refuses to continue the madness, the insanity of doing the same things, expecting different results. The topic of trust, also, it's prevalent in the circles that I weave in and out of. And the problem that I see is that too many teams have a certain tolerance. It's not a sampling. It's not a sample of tolerance. It is systemic tolerance for untrustworthiness. And this is just, again, it's a cop-out. It's low expectations for people. And so these are the foundations. These are the problems that I'm trying to solve with this material. But this material is not for everyone. So I do want to set the table as an off-ramp. This material is not for you if everything is hunky-dory in your culture. If your status reports, formally or informally, are always just green, 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 this material really aims to help those who are exasperated in their culture. Statistically speaking, there are professionals, they just like VUCA. They thrive in the chaos. They thrive in the madness. And this material is not for you. If you like VUCA, you should find inspiration elsewhere. And finally, another buzzword over the last year is this term resilience. We can have resilience for sampling errors, human errors, accidents, not a problem. But when culture is so dysfunctional that we are systemically tolerant of untrustworthiness, well, that stops being resilience and it really turns us into corporate doormats. And so, if you are tolerant of corporate culture where there are doormats, this material, this slide is your off ramp. So, the agenda for this session, first, we're going to talk about change. We're going to talk about leadership paradigms. What have they been? What are the conventional leadership paradigms? What door might we be willing to close to open up a different door of leadership paradigms? Where does the untrustworthiness exist? When untrustworthiness exists in the junior rankings of a company, those people don't really last. But when untrustworthiness exists at senior levels of the company, it absolutely can and often does survive. So we'll cover topics and tools that aim to manage up without kissing up. And finally, as a dance instructor, all the time I'm distinguishing mechanics of salsa, bachata, etc., from our style. And in corporate America, where we can often feel like administrative jockeys or paper pushers, order takers, it's helpful for our sanity and our self-esteem to be able to distinguish what are our team mechanics, our individual mechanics, versus team style, team flair, personality, uniqueness. And so let's talk about the distinction between team mechanics and team style. And the takeaways for this session. I love this quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson about how critical cross-pollination is to shape corporate cultures. I'm going to introduce a tool to you. The acronym spells Dr. Rad, and the framework contains 5 verbs. And I'll explain what 5 verbs replaces in the conventional corporate environment. And here are the 4 ingredients of trust. I landed on these 4 terms through a Northwestern University study at least 10 years ago. And I often talk about trust, as does Andrew Sykes, another I'm not sure if Andrew is a Kellogg professor or a Northwestern professor, but he's one of my role models when it comes to talking about trust and trustworthiness. So I believe he also uses this framework about if we're going to reduce the ambiguity of trust and trustworthiness, what are we really talking about? So these are the 4 flavors of trustworthiness. And so I hope you will keep these in mind for if and when you have trust issues in your environment. Let's really double click and minimize the ambiguity about where really is the trust issue. And again, the takeaway is to let's stop the systemic tolerance for untrustworthiness and let's be courageous and comfortable and commit to systematic intolerance for untrustworthiness. The deep dive of this material is in 2 of my 3 books. The 3rd book is not yet done. Okay, let's talk about leadership paradigms. And here at the top of this table, you see 2 different leadership paradigms. You see values and principles. That's the incumbent. And you see another column for metaphors, which I'll call the challenger. Imagine your CEO talking to a crowd of your colleagues about values and principles. And he or she will say something. These are not just words on the wall. Is it psychologically safe for you to reject your company's values and principles? No, it is not. Is anyone going to overtly opt out and raise their hand and say, these values and principles, not my jam? Well, that's difficult. But unfortunately, covertly, secretly, opting out of values and principles, it's really not that difficult and it's not uncommon. It is quite common. So values and principles are harboring lip service and inauthenticity. It is easy, or my question is it easy to detect when an executive has opted out and is not behaving according to values and principles? Often it is not easy to detect, and it is not easy to assign ownership when that executive has opted out of behaving with the corporate values and principles. So are corporations harboring double standards? Big yes. It's as if these values and principles, quote, are for thee, not for me. So we leave trust, we leave trustworthiness to chance. Our values and principles proactively going after and governing our untrustworthy actors? Rarely. What are the consequences for being untrustworthy in corporate America? I believe they're low. And so, does corporate often tolerate bad and hostile employees and hostile work environments, toxic work environments? Absolutely. So, values and principles, as long as they've been around as a leadership paradigm, should not, cannot be sacred because they have led us to where we are today with disengagement and fatigue and burnout and saturation, a poor job market, and the list goes on. So, of course, the next column that I'll expose for you now is all the opposites. And so, my first request, my first challenge for you is that you reconsider your leadership paradigms for your team. As an individual, as a human being, I absolutely respect your personal values and principles. But from a team perspective, values and principles have had their chance to make corporate environments better. They failed. So they should not be sacred. And what I'm proposing as a replacement is the leadership paradigm of metaphors. The next question you could very easily ask is, well, what are these metaphors? So this list is a mild attempt at humor. And so a first optional chat participation. Um, do you recognize any of these metaphors in your current, I mean, no, your past, of course, your current environment, I'm sure is spectacular, but do you know anyone, calling in for a friend here, do you recognize any of these metaphors? Do any of these terms describe your past work environments? And so what I've done here now, circled in red, is I've mapped each of these buzzwords, these terms, to VUCA plus. So you see VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. But over the last few years, as I've gathered this list of metaphors, I also felt I want to map these to competition, really hyper competitive environments, um, hostility, internal hostility in corporate environments, and saturation. And so, what I'm encouraging you to consider is the opposite of VUCA, and that's smooth, confident, simple, and clear. And again, you can see the mapping at a high level, but then we also need our role models. On the left, you have negative role models. On the right, you have positive role models. And again, going back to why would we choose metaphors over values and principles? It's because it is easy to overtly opt out. So I'll take the example on the right, the top right of a symphony. It is absolutely straightforward for a corporate employee to say, you know what? I don't like the culture of imitating a symphony, or I can go down that list. I don't want to feel like I'm in an environment of partner dancing or improvisation or theater or a relay race. No, this handoff stuff, not for me. But it is very difficult to covertly opt out. Again, it's very difficult to covertly opt out of the environments on the right as well. So we do better at shaping a culture of single standards. And I love the question for all of us to ask each other, what are we to each other? You might have heard the cliche, fail fast, fail small. Well, if we're going to dedicate and reinforce that we're one of these environments on the left, at least we can do it with our head up, eyes wide open, and fail fast. But these metaphors on the right, they have really impressive success rates. That's one reason why they are positive role models for us. And you'll see the performing arts in here quite a bit. Um, these are nothing short of an inspiration. Imitating the performing arts. The performing arts are fun. Um, they are familiar. and they're very financially attractive. And we'll cover that in later slides. Just how and why are or is imitating the performing arts financially attractive? So the previous slide was quite detailed, and I did want to flash up the same words, just zoomed out without the actual metaphors. And so this is the cultural transition that I'm proposing for you. We can solve VUCA. Patrick Lencioni is one of my role models. He talks all about teamwork. And this is my favorite quote. I think it's my favorite quote from Patrick. He's got a couple that I'm really fond of. But I'll read it. Not finance, not strategy, not tech. It is teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it is so powerful and so rare. And so I'm going to take a playful jab at AI here at the moment because I don't believe AI solves our trustworthiness problems. Um, Teamwork is a kind of intelligence, but it's authentic and it's human. And it's not individual human intelligence, it is collective human intelligence. And so that's where I believe I would love the hype to be less about AI. And I'd love to see more hype for CHI, and that is collective human intelligence. So I'm going to zoom out yet again, and I'm going to string together just for some break. Caitlin, are we doing okay? Is there anything in the, I don't think there's anything in the chat, but should I keep motoring on here, or is there anything to pause for?
Nope, nothing in the chat yet.
Okay. So what this slide does is it strings together three points of thought leadership. The first is from Greg Creed, the former CEO of Yum Brands, which oversees KFC, Taco Bell, and a few others. And I stumbled upon one of his podcasts a few years ago where the quote that I remember, he was so dry and stern about it. And he said, I will take to my grave that it is culture that fuels results. And his concern is that too many companies are following this structure that I'm showing here in the red arrows. What Greg Creed is recommending is following these green arrows. Structure, including org structure, the org chart should be fourth among this list. I haven't exposed what the fourth component is. Now, for those of you who know the name Peter Drucker has an overused quote. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It is so common. I didn't even put it on the slide, but I do mention it because it does reinforce the point of this slide. And then the third point of thought leadership is from Neil deGrasse Tyson. The cross-pollination of disciplines is fundamental to truly revolutionary advances in our culture. So I love this quote because an example is music. In corporate environments, we already hear extremely casual references to music. We'll hear, are we singing from the same hymnal? Are we on the same page? Let's get in sync. These are casual, informal, almost cute references to music. But if we want to align ourselves and really apply what Neil deGrasse Tyson is saying here, is that we must invert these four arrows. We must follow the green arrows, which means cross-pollination is the first decision and the first emphasis that we must make to shape culture. This is why I lean so heavily into the performing arts, because they are fun, familiar, financially attractive. Teams can and should be asking, what would a symphony do? What would a dance couple do? What would Second City, what would the art of improv teach us? These are valuable questions for a team to ask itself repeatedly. All right, so we're going to jump back into detailed metaphors as they affect speed. Now, if your culture shrugs at synchronization, you are inevitably treating speed as a leading culture trait. Speed for the sake of itself, franticness for the sake of itself. And this approach, this culture is what leads teams into meeting gridlock, communication traffic jams, saturation, and burnout. And I'm sorry, you might be aiming for speed, but last time I checked, anything or anyone involved in any kind of traffic jam, you're not moving fast. So I'm not gonna give you credit for being speedy just because you're in a traffic jam. So I'm inviting you to treat speed as a lagging culture trait, which means something needs to be upstream for you to maintain traffic flow. And that upstream culture trait is synchronization. When you look at these cars on the right, imagine their discipline, imagine their empathy. Every single moving vehicle really, really cares about the behaviors of the car next to it. And so we have to make a decision. How do you want to see speed? If you treat speed as a leading culture trait, you end up on the left. If you're willing to treat speed as a lagging culture trait, you end up with traffic flow that resembles on the right. A few years ago, I stumbled upon a Lee Iacocca quote. Lee Iacocca was an automobile executive from the last century. And Lee Iacocca's quote was, "The speed of the boss is the speed of the team." And as an amateur musician, I very easily, politely disagree. I believe that it is the synchronization skill, not just of the boss, but really of the team. It is the synchronization skill of the team that dictates the speed of the team. And if you think that this emphasis on synchronization in music is just semantic or cute, here's one more uh, conclusion about traffic jams, because I believe when investors and executives consciously or subconsciously see these traffic jams and they sense, well, everyone's complaining that there's too much work to do. Things are stuck. Why would I put more cars on the road? This leads, again, consciously or subconsciously, I believe this leads investors and executives to limit their investment, their innovation, and their hiring. The supply and demand of innovation goes down. This is not cute. This is absolutely consequential. So if we can reshape our cultures so that executives and investors, they see the flow, they see the symphony, they have confidence in the rhythm, they are going to increase investment, innovation, and hiring, moving the supply and demand curves of innovation to the right. Imitating a symphony, it's not cute. It is absolutely consequential. There is a big difference in speed between work that is idle at zero versus moseying along at a healthy, sustainable pace versus rush, 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 where we're really turning the screws on a team that only moves their speed mildly compared to just don't be stuck. Let's minimize idleness. So again, I'd love to pause. The chat is it still really quiet, Caitlin?
Yes, yeah. No questions are coming
Okay,
yet.
okay. I'm gonna keep motoring. So we're trying to move it. We're moving on the agenda, of course, and I need to euthanize another framework that is hurting corporate culture. And I'll start presenting this slide with a question. And again, if you're comfortable, reflect out loud in the chat if you like. Have you ever felt accountable for certain work without having the corresponding authority? Most of us have. We have felt accountable for certain work without having the corresponding authority. And what that means is evidently someone else, probably senior to us, they have authority without accountability. Lucky them. And we are formalizing this decoupling. Decoupling authority from accountability sets us up to fail. We have a framework called the RACI matrix. It is ubiquitous, at least in the IT environment, and I believe plenty of non-IT environments also use the RACI matrix. RACI it's four adjectives. If you're not familiar with RACI, RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. RACI harbors a lot of ambiguity. It has not solved our biggest problems. It is absolutely a false sense of governance. It should not be sacred. On the other hand, we have another framework that defines and formalizes authority without accountability. And that tool is called the org chart. The combination of the RACI matrix and the org chart set us up for failure. So these should not be sacred for shaping a healthier culture. So I'm going to propose to you an alternate for these four adjectives. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to propose a framework called the five verbs. And here's the thought process behind moving from a framework of four adjectives to a framework of five verbs. For those of you experienced in a racy matrix, anything you would govern with four adjectives is going to involve four or more people. That should be easy to accept, and I don't think that statement is very provocative or controversial. Next step in the thought process. If that work is going to involve four or more people and your future team will care about it, that work is worth documenting. Whatever that work is and the decisions involved should not reside in people's heads, and it should not reside buried in someone's email box. So if that work is worth documenting, it is worth governing, not with four adjectives, but with verbs that make it idiot proof that we are going to put this information, this decision on paper. Let's not be apologetic or shy about healthy documentation when we govern with verbs that guarantee that we're going to document this collaboration. And there's a whole host of subtle culture behavior shifts when we start governing with five verbs. That list is long, and this session doesn't have time for it. But if you're curious about the extremely positive domino effect of five verbs, that is an excuse to get in touch with me after this session, and I'm happy to share more with you about that. So what are these five verbs? And thank goodness that these five verbs loosely map to the RACI. But let's put them in the right order. And I'm delighted that someone at PMI, Project Management Institute, San Diego, a couple years ago, immediately saw the acronym that I had failed to see since my ops class at Kellogg, which was the first time I ever used this framework, was after week 3 or something in my operations and supply chain class at Kellogg. So it's a fun acronym, Dr. Rad. And so I would ask you, if RACI has been a habit of yours, if you've populated a RACI before, you've populated 4 adjectives. Would you be willing to populate 5 verbs? This habit, this shared habit, is how we reshape culture. Next question. Well, what would I govern with 5 verbs? Because this documentation, over the last 20 years, a lot of formal documentation has fallen out of favor. So my books and in my public speaking, my case studies and consulting, I do educate to organizations. Well, what is that? What is that documentation that can withstand the rigor of 5 verbs? And so this is a zoomed out answer to that question: is what innovation teams put on paper. They'll fall these decisions, this collaboration falls under the categories of things like people, process, technology, design, build, test, current state, future state. Oh, this is release specific or project specific, or this is cross project or cross release. So again, this is a zoomed out lens of answering that question: what would we govern with 5 verbs? It's a lot. I'm only giving you 10 categories, and I count 54 items, 54 documents that I believe that I can defend that they're worth governing and can withstand the rigor of these 5 verbs. It's a lot, but it's finite. And now that you, by the end of this session, will be armed with this finite inventory, you and your team are now empowered to disagree and make this notion of finite productivity your own. And Caitlin, you came on camera, so what do you
Yeah, there
think?
was a quick question in the chat about asking if you could give a real world example of the 4 adjective versus 5 verb framework to help people kind of wrap their minds around it a bit more.
So yes, a real world example. So that is the next slide. So I don't think I have to um, I don't think I have to take a detour to answer that question. So the earlier slide, I gave you 10 categories. Now uh, we're going to dig into the gruesome detail. So in my second book, I educate what are all of these things that are worth putting on paper. What should an innovation ensemble, what should an innovation team put on paper? So the top third of the screen, you see project independent work. The middle here, you see work that's under the category of project management. People, also known as change management. For those of you who know the company ProSci, my materials leverage ProSci's ADKAR methodology. In the middle, you'll see process documentation. And then for the conventional tech stuff under design, build, test, um, these are all the items that over the course of my career, I have found helpful and vital to put on paper. So not much creativity on my part here. I'm really just assembling and synthesizing all the deliverables, the assets that are worth putting on paper to maximize the alignment and maximize the trustworthiness of a team. So I will pause momentarily, Caitlin, to see if there's something else in the chat to see if I am answering this question to their satisfaction. But the next couple slides will continue to answer that question. Real world, we'll put it on a schedule, and we're going to sign people up for the 5 verbs. Should I pause again or go ahead?
No follow-up yet, but Dr. Covington, if you do have a follow-up, please let us know.
Excellent. So this is the asset portfolio. And now that you have it, you can leverage it, you can change it, you can disagree with it. And at the most extreme, if any of you are extremely documentation averse, then I have just provided a checklist for you of all the things that your team should avoid documenting, such as a project charter, code. Code's my favorite example because if you're really documentation averse, maybe you should store your code in your head. This is high discipline. This is very high empathy. But what I'm aiming to do is shape a culture that minimizes reinventing the wheel and that is so explicit that it makes it incredibly straightforward and pragmatic to change our mind, to reinvent ourselves. To use a dance analogy, I want to maximize our muscle memory so that I can minimize resembling a dancer constantly looking at my feet. I want our team to not resemble a dancer constantly looking at their feet so their eyes are up on each other, on our customers, on our future customers. Um, and we'll talk more about the distinction between mechanics and style later. The right documentation, governed with 5 verbs, is nothing short of a love letter to your future team. On the contrary, if you want to set up your future team for failure, ignore and avoid more and more of this documentation and store your team decisions in your head, bury them in your email, or sprawl them across X number of meeting minutes. And this is why the subtitle of my second book is 5 Verbs Shapes Your Team's Legacy. Imagine an employee on day one where they're being told, hey, part of your role is that you need to become familiar with the recent decisions of this team, current state, future state. Imagine a new employee as part of their onboarding that they receive whatever fraction of this portfolio to accelerate their institutional knowledge and their confidence in the team. So this asset portfolio, as I mentioned, we'll dig more in a future slide. We'll distinguish between the mechanics of our work versus the style. This inventory is what do we do that's worth governing? Because everything else is just a chat. And if something isn't worth 5 verbs, I'm not sure it's worth 1 verb. And it definitely doesn't have, it can't defend, it can't justify holding space or being scheduled in a project plan. Because whatever that work is, it's just a chat. Let's keep asking ourselves, what do we do? What do we collaborate on that's worth reserving time? Just like a symphony, where does it fit in the whole fabric of the musical movement. This is very explicit. It is absolutely not rigid. The ink is always wet. This is another, I'm seeing more chats pop up, Caitlin, so I'll respect if you'd like to stop me again. This is what the five verbs looks like in a schedule. For those of you who read music, or if you've even ever seen a piece of music, I hope you can see a rhythm, a pacing, boundaries, holding space. Five verbs, four rows. And a recent presentation I gave to an association of business analysts, that's what I mean by BA. So your role for certain decision bundles in your environment, you might say, I don't need to be involved in the draft, the review, revise, or the approval, but I would like to receive the output. So you can see bundle by bundle, what do you want to sign up for? So instead of populating a RACI, you can populate these five verbs in a schedule. I love this quote that really leans into dependencies. Unacknowledged dependencies remain the number one root cause for project slippage. When you manage with the five verbs, your dependencies are incredibly simple. They are incredibly transparent, and they are incredibly changeable. What we are willing to synchronize is what we should be willing to sponsor. So this equates sponsorship and synchronization. If work is not sponsored, it's not worth synchronizing. I'm not trying to rush the work. I'm trying to rush the space between the work. Five verbs is a forcing function. In the words of W. Clement Stone, it is a small hinge that swings a large door of culture change. It is a liberating structure. Just like a dancer, a salsa dancer knows the structure of footwork. Quick, quick, slow, quick, quick, slow, quick, quick, slow, quick, quick, slow. Five verbs is that. It is the quick, quick, slow for teamwork. And if there's a problem, it is plain. It is not mysterious. It is plain and it is pragmatic to spot the problem. There are only four problems, and this maps into the outputs of a lessons learned exercise. Every lessons learned exercise that we perform, which I recommend monthly, results in some combination of four changes. Number one, do our decision bundles themselves change? Does our asset portfolio change? Number two, do the interdependencies change? Number three, do the assignments change? And number four, do the duration estimates change? Too many lessons learned exercises in corporate America right now. The feedback loop is so loose and so squishy, you almost wonder what's the point? Five verbs really builds teeth into our lessons learned exercises because five verbs is a kind of RACI with teeth. RACI itself lacks teeth. Five verbs has teeth. So this is what a problem looks like. Something got stuck. For whatever reason, this got stuck. So what the five verbs helps us do is it minimizes the cost to detect untrustworthiness. We're aiming to minimize the cost to reassign untrustworthiness. This is systematic. We are constantly looking for the next instance of possible untrustworthiness. And what I mean by untrustworthiness is some combination of incompetence, dishonesty, low dependability, and malevolence. And I insist that we keep authority and accountability coupled. I know where the authority is. It's incredibly stable, stationary. And I'm going to keep delegating accountability up the chain to keep authority and accountability fused together. Does latency matter? Well, it comes in two forms. There's work that just sits there. That is my alarm for me to head to the exits and wrap up in the next 5 minutes. There's a difference between work that just sits there and people that just sit there. One of my concerns related to this image is that the poor job market right now, in one way, it should make no sense because there is so much valuable and profitable innovation work to be done in our society. And there is a surplus of skilled, experienced, eager, enthusiastic innovation professionals who are ready, but the job market is doing a terrible job playing matchmaker. I believe it's because of our communication traffic jams and our culture. Synchronization and latency, playing matchmaker between idle work and idle workers. This is crucial to shape our cultures. And I'm more than willing to replace the recent obsession with frequency, thank you, Agile Manifesto, speed, and duration. Frequency, speed, and duration are all different things. There are many conversations going on that treat these as the exact same things. They're not the same things. And none of them should be primary culture traits. I would love us to instead be obsessed with synchronization and low latency. Low latency. That is culture shaping. We don't have to be order takers. So again, because of time and because this is such a text heavy slide, I'm going to kind of fly over this and ask you on your own, do you see the distinction and the value and the unavoidable hybrid of these two columns? Learn the rules like a pro. This isn't about administration. Learn the quick, quick, slow, and the 5 verbs like a pro so you can break them like an artist. This is the combination of this is trustworthiness at scale. Symphonies have finite productivity. And I did some simple math. I did pull these numbers out of the air. But symphonies have finite productivity. So do innovation teams. This is my simple math that I can defend. And now that you have this number and you have this slides, you have this PDF, you are now licensed and more than qualified to disagree and ask your team, do we like the concept of finite productivity? It's not rigid, it's just explicit. And every project, every month, you can continue to refine, what does done mean? What does success mean? There's a lot of commotion out there about fixing meetings. And so this slide aims to provide a different point of view than these points of view, such as, well, we just need 4-day meetings. We just need to forbid meetings on Wednesday. It's a 4 days. I think that's counterproductive because you strangle the progress of work. But what I would ask you to do differently is, instead of governing with those 4 adjectives, racy, and a million different verbs, instead govern with 0 adjectives and only 5 verbs. Don't boil the ocean. Don't prohibit other work. Just recognize that it's not worth documenting. It's not worth synchronizing. Just don't ask your central planning and orchestration function to micromanage your stuff that is not collaborative and that no one will care about 6 weeks from now. But back on the topic of meetings, this is what the typical team is doing right now. In the front seat is meetings and emails, and in the back seat, it's notes. We're just hitting the record button for AI-generated meeting transcriptions. I'm asking you to switch seats. What belongs in your front seat is your asset inventory. It is your finite productivity. What's in your back seat are meetings and emails in service. Meetings and emails are wonderful servants. They are horrible masters. You have an impressive vocabulary, an exotic vocabulary. There's a time and place for it. A project plan is not the time and place to hold a public dumping ground of spontaneously conceived, micromanaged tasks. Let's focus on our muscle memory and let's master our mundane. Let's be brilliant at the basics. Let's be fabulous at fundamentals. So I'm asking you an awkward choice. Do you want to have high expectations for your team? If you do, you will lean into finite productivity. If you have low expectations for your team, you will stay and wallow in infinite activity, meetings, meeting minutes, Jira tickets. I'm asking you to be systematically intolerant of untrustworthiness so that your success is systematic, not perfect, just systematic. One of my dance directors used to challenge us saying, Don't rehearse until you get it right. Rehearse until it's kind of hard to get it wrong. Just one more visual. There's a fork in the road for all of us if we have the courage and the psychological safety to shape culture. Here are the economics. Low trustworthiness has high marginal costs. It's cheap up front. It's cheap up front. But if we have high trustworthiness, it's not free. It's the tall black bar. It's culture. A strong culture is that tall black bar. Why do we do it? Because the short red bar is conducive to profit margin. Here's another slightly tweaked lens. Tolerance is cheap up front. Intolerance is expensive up front. And then let's look at our communication channels. If you're a team that is addicted to meetings and emails and whatever's documenting is in the spirit of conversation residue, totally understandable because of the short black bar. But as the volume of your traffic increases, much like a traffic jam, why is grumbling about meetings understandable? It's the tall red bar. That is your traffic jam. So, of course, I'm challenging you. If you want to reshape your culture and you want to scale trustworthiness, you must be nothing short of obsessed with what's under that black bar. The benefits are the short red bar. This is about solving VUCA. I don't include V volatility because the mischievous improviser in me says, you know what? I don't mind positive surprises. I don't mind positive surprises. So I'm not going to solve the V of VUCA, but this work aims to solve the U, C, and A of VUCA. I love this quote about balance, and I just swapped out the word balance and I substituted the word trustworthiness. A team in motion is never completely trustworthy, but a smart team is always correcting. Just like riding a bike, we're constantly correcting for untrustworthiness, constantly delegating accountability up. Because the big problems are not among the junior employees. The big problems reside, the root causes are among senior ranking employees. Let's not apologize for adopting habits to terrify the untrustworthy. I didn't want to end on this slide, so I do have 3 more slides. But the deep dive of this material is in 2 books. And so we started with why, and let's end with why. This material declares that VUCA is a cop-out. Let's solve VUCA. Let's stop doing the same things, expecting a different result, and let's convert our systematic tolerance for untrustworthiness into systematic intolerance for untrustworthiness. The bigger body of work, my consulting, my books, etc., aim to help teams that see themselves on the left. They have chaos, cruelty, communication traffic jams, meeting gridlock, and they feel like a frustration factory. And if this is you, whether it's my YouTube videos or a conversation on the side or my books, I can help your team resemble an elegant expectation factory. The 5 verbs shapes this factory. You've seen 54 items that are worth governing with 5 verbs. And hopefully you feel the sprinkling of the performing arts that I've shared through this session. High discipline and high empathy is very elegant work. I'm in conversation with a recent PMI president named Antonio Nieto Rodriguez, and he absolutely has I think, a mic drop quote. Projects are our future, the future of your organization. It depends on the success of your projects. When we fail with our projects, we fail to shape our future. When we succeed with projects, we succeed with our future. So my last slide is this, my call to action for you. There's a lot of words here. Just find some fraction that resonates with you. If you like the metaphor of a symphony, just keep that in mind every day. And remember, lens on music, it's not cute, it's consequential. Yes, this requires courage to manage up without kissing up. Meetings should be in your back seat. They're wonderful servants. They're horrible masters. Um, there's a label for executives who are trustworthy. That label is leadership. There's a label for untrustworthy executives, and that word is climbership. So I tweaked the slide here again because I'm giving you the contrast. The pointy point of view is I want you to have both eyes open for what culture you feel comfortable pursuing. It's a pointy point of view. It's not a squishy point of view. And so I hope these materials are helpful for you long term as you decide what is your appetite for shaping your culture. So, Caitlin, I think I can pause there, and I hope we still have time for some reactions, Q&A, etc. But if anyone does have to leave before the top of the hour, I'll thank you in advance for joining, and I hope you'll reach out to me on LinkedIn. Caitlin, where should we go from here?
Yeah, so people can still feel free to submit some questions. If you'd like, you can do it anonymously through the Q&A or you can do it in the chat. Um, one quick question. So typically innovation work is messy, and this feels pretty neat. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so when it's messy, you're shrugging at the symphony. I'm going to pick on the word experimentation. All else equal, do I want to pursue experimentation where my uh, percentage confidence level for success is 20%? Or do I want to pursue work that the percentage confidence level is 80%? All else equal, I'm going to go pursue the work that has an 80% confidence level. I believe there's an overemphasis and over glamorization of experimentation. And I would just challenge that team to say, well, have you been sufficiently empathetic, as in documenting current state, to minimize the ambiguity about what the problems are? Because as you reduce the ambiguity about what the problems are, you're going to raise your prospects for success, and innovation is going to feel less messy. So I think messy is the same as VUCA, and I take an unapologetic stance that it's a cop out. Can it be messy? Sure. But then I would say, well, then your culture is green. And that is the off ramp, because if messiness is not a problem, then you're green. And this material is for innovators who find the chaos and the VUCA and the messiness unacceptable. And that's a choice. Either so let me put it in terms of a multiple choice question. We can be proactively pro messiness, pro VUCA. We can be proactively anti messiness, anti VUCA. Or option C, we can be passive and just say, VUCA just is. Messiness just is. And who am I? Who am I to shape culture? So choose A, B, or C. Proactively pro VUCA, proactively anti VUCA, anti messiness, or just be passive and just own your choice.
Fair enough. Um, Another thing, you talked obviously a lot about documentation, and I know from firsthand experience that that can feel hard to carve out the time to do and work on when there's feels like there's always more pressing matters and tasks and projects to get done. How does one get around that when that feels like such an integral part of what you've shared?
Yeah. So this is very similar to any growing city who is struggling to build infrastructure. Um, if everyone's just trying to stay busy and keep moving, um, you have to decide, can you pause enough to build infrastructure? And if you can't, well, then don't. But then you're the city of Chicago without any trains or buses. You're a big city without an airport. Adult decision, infrastructure or no? And if you don't want infrastructure, there are certain cities in the world, I'm not going to pick on those cities today, but there are certain cities in the world that have a reputation for just unbelievable traffic. Well, if that's the culture you're willing to accept, um, just own it and don't expect to scale. build the CTA or don't build the CTA. Evanston has the purple line for a reason. And if you can't pause to build the purple line, go without. Good luck with your parking lots.
Yep. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, but are there any other final words from you, Robert, before we wrap up?
So we titled this session Shaping Culture, Dialing Down Ambiguity and Dialing Up the Awkwardness. And so I'm just hopeful that some fraction of this material will resonate, whether it's today, next year, next decade, or I believe this material is provocative enough to bounce it off your coworkers. Um, and respond to me. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. I'm just one person. Um, I'm coachable. I would be a hypocrite if I wasn't. So let's have the conversation about what, especially what you might disagree with. But absolutely know that I come armed with some pretty compelling culture traits, such as low marginal cost, rhythm, the performing arts, collaboration. And I've already painted a picture for you in these slides of the pointy point of view. If you'll notice on almost every slide, you see the alternative. So when you reject elegance and you say, absolutely, I want VUCA, on those last few slides, you have a laundry list of all the things that you can and should pursue if you're a chaos agent and that is the environment you want. Just own it. And now I've given you language and tools for both VUCA and elegance. So hopefully I've set the table well for you to take this material forward, regardless of which way you turn, right or left. Choose either systemic tolerance or systematic intolerance for trustworthiness. High expectations or low expectations of your humans. And I'd love us to organize ourselves into this decision symphony on our terms, because agentic orchestration is here. Agentic orchestration is here. And if humans don't organize ourselves into symphonies on our terms, AI is going to organize us into symphonies on AI's terms. I would just like humans to organize ourselves on our terms, but this is not AI. This is CHI. I call it collective human intelligence. Humans are worth investing in. We're worth it.
Great. Thank you, Robert. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate this wonderful presentation, Robert. And as a reminder, the recording is going to be shared in the next day or two. And Robert has also graciously put all of the slides, including some extras, I think, at the end that we didn't show today, for you all to refer back to. So those will be sent as a PDF in our follow-up email, as well as some links to the books that Robert mentioned, if you would like to dive into this deeper. And we're also sharing Robert's LinkedIn profile. So if you'd like to reach out, connect, ask some additional questions, please feel free to reach out to him there. And to find out more about other alumni events, please check out the NAA's website at alumni.northwestern.edu. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and go Cats.
Go Cats. Thanks, Caitlin.